Hello and welcome to the second Scholastic Parents Night. Tonight's topic is keeping kids engaged with reading, something we know many of you are thinking about. I'm Schu and I live in Naperville, Illinois, which is a western suburb of Chicago. I was a third grade teacher for 3 years, a fourth grade teacher for 1 year, a teacher librarian for 9 years, and now I'm the ambassador of school libraries for Scholastic book fairs. A huge thank you to everyone out there joining us tonight. A huge thank you to the partner bookshops for co-hosting this event. And of course, to all of the wonderful panelists who I will be introducing shortly. If there's a book that's shared tonight that your heart needs or the heart of someone in your life needs, please, if possible, purchase it from your local participating bookshop. And please ask questions. There's either a comment box next to me or below me, I'm not sure, but I know you'll find it. And later we will have time during the Q&A to answer many of your questions. If you're inspired to share something that you heard tonight during this event, please use the hashtag Scholastic Parents Night, tag your local independent bookshop at Scholastic on Twitter and at Scholastic Inc. on Instagram. I think those are all of the housekeeping announcements for tonight. And so now I am so excited to welcome Pam Allyn and Dr. Ernest Morrell to the virtual stage to talk about their book, Every Child a Super Reader. Hello, Pam. I think I just saw you pop up. Hi, Pam Allyn. And hey, hello, Dr. Ernest Morrell. Now, I want to tell you all a little bit about Pam. Pam is one of my favorite people on this planet. She is the creator of World Read Aloud Day, which I know many of you celebrated last week. I had so much fun celebrating it with students in New York and librarians in Kentucky. Both of those were, of course, done virtually. Dr. Ernest Morrell, I think I saw you pop up. Welcome. I'm so excited to be here with you tonight. Ernest is the director of the Center for Literacy Education at the University of Notre Dame. And now I'm going to pass it over to Pam and to Ernest. See you in a little bit.
Thanks, John. Thank you so much, John. For Pam and I, our mission is really to increase joy in reading. It's for one reason, primarily. Kids who have joy in reading, they read more and they read better. One way we found to increase joy is to focus on children's strengths and social and emotional learning. Pam and I wrote Every Child a Super Reader so that all children would see themselves as strong readers and as people who are able to impact the world around them, even while they're children. What we'd like to do is talk about our strengths today. Our strengths are really structured, moving from like learning about yourself and really kind of being aware of yourself, being able to engage others, and then ultimately to be able to impact the world. So what we're gonna do, Pam and I will tag team. We'll identify each of the 7 strengths, kind of explain what it means, and then ways that parents might use these strengths to increase joy and the connection to reading for kids. So I'm gonna start with the first strength. It really is about like the self that I talked about, it's belonging. So for Pam and I, belonging is really about attachment and students developing identities as readers. There's a lot of ways I think that parents and families can promote belonging, creating read aloud times that are rituals and fun. It doesn't have to be long. It can be 5, 10, 15 minutes as a chunk and it's still really valuable. Choosing books to read as a whole family, sharing child's reading growth with grandparents and extended family. You know, I say if we celebrated reading growth the way we celebrate like goals in soccer or dance recitals, kids would really be into it. Posting reading accomplishments on the refrigerator or wall, and having quiet, independent reading time as a family. Again, doesn't have to be long. It could just be 5 or 10 minutes, and it's still really important for kids. Pam?
Thank you, Ernest, and hi, everybody. So glad to be here with you all in this great group tonight. The second strength in the 7 strengths framework that Ernest and I practice and talk about and think about and share with children is the strength of curiosity. And curiosity is a huge asset for our children of all ages in terms of thinking about them, their wonderings, their ideas, their preoccupations, all the things that are on their minds. Reading and being an engaged reader means we are connecting with text in those open ways. And then sometimes in school, what happens is that our children are asked a lot of questions that feel very closed. So the questions are about who's the main character or what's the main idea. But when in fact, when we read, we're probably not doing so much of that in our minds as we are more about doing the kinds of wondering work that we talk about in this strength of curiosity. And so what Ernest and I talk a lot about is how we can position ourselves as parents, as caregivers, to be inviting a conversation with our children around what makes them curious. So when you're reading together, or as Ernest said, with the read aloud, or when children are reading independently, or when reading side by side with you, is to ask them questions that are open-ended, such as, what are you wondering about? Or what surprises you? Or how might your reading or our reading today change the world or change our community? So those kinds of open-ended questions. Also too, in our homes, even if there's not a lot of space or spaciousness in the home itself, is to find a little cozy corner where we can create a wondering wall or a wondering window. And on there, we can put Post-its or look out the window and invite ourselves to think about the world as if I'm always an inquirer. So I'm interested in the deer outside my window today. So I might be reading more about them. Where do they sleep in the snow? Do they feel warm? Those are the kinds of questions I ask and then model back to, let's find out more about that. And as readers, we do. Back to you, Ernest.
Thank you. So belonging and curiosity are really strengths that are focused on the self, like knowing myself and really liking myself and thinking about myself as having ideas. So friendship, which is the third strength, is the first of those others, being aware of others and acting kind toward others. So we really see friendship as being defined by putting others' perspectives above our own. That really came from a lot of research we did for the Every Child a Super Reader book. And there are a lot of things I think that parents and families can do to promote friendship. First is reading books around the theme of friendship with your child and talking about what it means to be a friend. How do we know these folks are friends? How do you think about yourself as being a friend? Documenting acts of friendship in the community, in the home. For Pam and I, it's really a big idea. We'll keep coming back to it. Having kids see themselves as acting on the world while they're kids. And so one way is to think about acts of friendship. So you can come home on the way home from school or at the dinner table, talk about, this is what I did today. I think it was a real act of friendship. And we can document them. Again, we can put them on the refrigerator or the wall. Even forming connections. And I think, even coming out of COVID, it's probably more important that we form connections with those around us. So one of the suggestions we have in the book is forming a family or neighborhood book club, where we choose books. It could be books for kids. They could be, books for older people, but the kids can still participate in the conversations. We also advocate becoming a friend, a reader friend to an elderly person in your community. There's nothing like being read to or reading with a child. And so whether it's our neighbor or a person down the street or someone in our church or our synagogue or our mosque, someone who's a grandparent of a friend on a sports team, becoming a reader friend to them. Also, we suggest adopting a soldier, which is a really popular program, but becoming kind of a reader or writer buddy to someone who's stationed overseas. All those are ways that we can really enact friendship in our families and homes. Pam?
Yeah, thank you, Ernest. No matter how many times we've ever talked about the strengths, I always love listening to you talk about them. So thank you, everybody, for giving me that opportunity. Also, the strength of kindness, that's our next strength, and that is the sort of reaching out into the world. But one of the things we love about the strength of kindness that you can practice in your home with your children is that kindness is also about ourselves, and children are very hard on themselves as readers. So when we think about this idea of engaging as readers, is that we can model for our children that, you know what, I make mistakes as a reader. I'm not perfect. I'm stumbling over words, and sometimes I don't know the word, or I'm reading a book that's too hard for me and I might try to push my way through it, or I might put it aside. And so that idea of being kind, not only to others, but to yourself, like don't be hard on yourself, be good to yourself. Say, I feel strong as a reader, and you can model that for your child. And then the other piece about kindness is the external piece. Ernest talked about book friends, reading friends, having a book club, even within the home. That act of kindness might be you saying to your child, can you share with me the story that was read to you today at school? Be my reading friend today while I'm cooking dinner. I would just love to hear your voice. So even as a reader, that idea of engagement around reading is you are modeling, you're making visible what the power of reading is, that sense of bringing you close. The child doesn't even have to know how to read yet to be able to do that. And then finally, just one more quick thing about kindness is that the affirmations of kindness as a parent, as a caregiver, is to say there are lots of little things we can do. Ernest and I often talk about the idea of shooting stars, that you can give a child to, wow, you reread that book. That's awesome. I'm going to give you a star. Thank you, Ernest. And also, even just reading an entire graphic novel for the first time, that's an accomplishment. That's an act of kindness, is to say, I just appreciate that you did that. I admire you for that. And your modeling of that will help that child engage with him or herself as a reader. Back to you, E.
So friendship and kindness are really the strengths about like being aware of others and being kind toward others and yourself. And then, as I said earlier, we kind of have a self, others, and then impact on the world. So the first of the world strengths is really confidence. We start by thinking about, students and why they lack confidence. Students really want to succeed. Your children want to succeed. And they know becoming strong readers is important. But one of the big barriers to the confidence is being, one of the barriers to being motivated is the lack of confidence. So when we really think about confidence and motivation as being connected. So is my kid motivated to read? One of the questions would be, do they feel confident as readers? Are they motivated to do their homework? Do they feel confident? So we know that when students' confidence increases as readers, their motivation increases, and then the motivation really leads to all the things that connect to reading achievement and reading joy. Some of the things that you can do as a family to promote confidence: asking children about their opinions, letting a child lead a family dinner or road trip conversation. It's a favorite in my household. Talking to children about how they would change the world. Again, back to that world changers. And finally, writing notes of praise to your children. Pam?
Yeah, and I think, confidence leads to courage, and courage is a very important strength, a muscle that our children are building all the time. Some of this is seeing courage in the stories that your children are reading, and as you read to them too, to point out that even that little bunny going to sleep at night alone is an act of courage. But then turning courage back to this idea of being an engaged reader is to point out and be the noticer, be the affirmational noticer of all the courageous things your child does as a reader. A child who reads through a whole series, that's courage. A child who gets through a hard part of a book, that's courage. A child who says, I'm gonna browse through this nonfiction book, or with you try to learn about something new that's hard to understand, that's courage. And I think that idea of naming the work that children do as readers as courageous, or a child comes home and says, I had a bad day at school, my teacher didn't think I was such a good reader today, is to frame that back in the asset model and to say, you know what, you were courageous for taking in that information, and I'm proud of you for being a courageous reader. And I think that idea of courage is about, for us to raise engaged readers, is to say, be really noticing as a parent or caregiver, where is your child really showing something, some fortitude to actually get through something hard. A lot of the work that our kids do in the middle school is very, very difficult, complicated text. And so if they're struggling in social studies or science and other subjects, give them time at home to actually read in an engaged manner and to be comfortable, and to have the courage not only to read hard books, but to actually go back and reread easier books, and to say, you know what, that is part of being a growing, courageous, confident, learning reader, is to read all the books in your life that it counts to absorb and marinate all of those words and language. Back to you, Ernest.
Yep, so I'll conclude quickly. Hope is the final strength. Hope is a basic human need. When we lose our hope, we really lose our humanity. When we think about it as related to every child of super readers, children who envision powerful futures will act powerfully with hope in the present. A couple things that we can do as families and parents: encourage children to dream big and talk about the future, discussing future goals and hopes as a family, creating a hope wall for the family or hope for the week, and then embodying hope in a positive spirit in the home, and having children interview elders, maybe in our family or in the communities, or to learn about their hopes for the next generation.
Yay! Thank you so much. You're both so inspiring. And Ernest, my question for you and Pam is about hope. And I was like, oh no, he's gonna cover the second part of my question, and you didn't. So thank you, Ernest. So this is my question for both of you. In late December, I moderated a wonderful conversation with KHD Camillo. And in the conversation, we talked about hope, and we talked about empathy, and we talked about solace. And so I would love, you've already talked about hope, but I would love to hear your thoughts about how reading stories, about how experiencing stories can deliver hope and can help develop empathy. So can you share your thoughts on empathy?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing that, John. I think that empathy building is a huge part of the reading experience and our reading lives. So both about setting hopes and dreams as readers and saying to our children, we're always aspirational and thinking that way, but also in the pages of the books we read, building our own muscles around empathy, looking at how characters are tenderly interacting with each other, or also using the opportunity of that reading experience to say, how can I put myself in the shoes of another? How can I be somewhere I wasn't? How can I step into another world? That's the most amazing thing about reading, is that it is transporting us, and that I want you as parents to take that time with your children to really live into that idea of empathy building through reading, that it's not just about we have to get through those words or we have to take that comprehension quiz, but it's really about creating readers for a lifetime, hopeful, flourishing readers with such a deep heart.
Yeah, I agree with everything Pam has said. I was thinking about it in three ways, John. One is we can develop empathy in the books that we choose, right? And so we want to choose books that kind of expose kids to the human condition. Two, we can develop empathy with the kinds of questions we ask and the conversations we have about the books that we read. And then third, we can actually take action based on the books that we read. And I feel like sometimes we stop at one, sometimes we go to two, but like, what do you want to do after you've read the book? So we can actually go out and do things with our kids. We can have projects based on the ideas that come up in the books that we read. That way it's not just empathy, it's also action based on that empathy.
Thank you. Thank you, Ernest, and thank you, Pam. And I will see you later during the Q&A. Everyone out there, if you do not already have a copy of Every Child a Super Reader, you can purchase a copy on bookshop.org from your favorite local independent bookshop. And now I am excited to welcome Andrea Davis Pinkney to the virtual stage. I think I just saw her pop up. I'm not sure. I think I still see Pam, but Colin is probably fixing that. So Andrea Davis Pinkney is a vice president and executive editor at Scholastic. She's an award-winning author, a New York Times best-selling author of some of my all-time favorite books, and she loves a musical theater, which is what we always talk about when we're together. So now I'm going to pass it over to Andrea.
Thank you, John. Good evening, everyone. So I am coming to you from Brooklyn, New York, where I have been in this same chair for about a year since we shut down and the pandemic began. I've been sitting here just doing my work. The snow is piled high. I am here with my husband, Brian Pinkney, who's illustrated many of the books that I've written, and our daughter and our son. So there's a lot of remote learning and a lot of family togetherness going on in our home. And that's a gift. We're all very happy to be together and well. But I have to ask you, please do not come over here unannounced. I'm not going to turn my camera around, but believe me when I tell you that the dining room table where I am sitting is piled with books. You cannot even see the top of the table, because usually these books are at my office at Scholastic, but you know, since the pandemic, they've all been coming here. And when I looked out at my table today, I thought, this is so apropos to what we're talking about, which is this idea of engaging kids in the act of reading and books at a table, because it just feels like, you know, it just feels like books are like food to me. You know, it's something that you serve up. Books bring us together. They let us gather around. Stories nourish us. And that just feels really right for everything that's going on. So how do we get our kids to read? All right, I think about this question with three sets of eyes. Okay, so I have my publisher eyes, and I think about it that way. And I have my editor eyes, and I have my writer eyes. I guess it's four sets of eyes. And I have my mommy eyes. And the words that come to mind when I think about all those things are access, choice, and the power of the read aloud. So again, I'm not going to show you because it's really embarrassing, but the dining room table, you know, I think about the idea of access and this notion that to grab a book, to have a lot of books around is a good thing, because it's the same muscles in the hand for grabbing like a drumstick, for grabbing that book. So the more books I have around, I cannot bemoan my pile because it means that my kids have a lot to choose from right here. And that's the next thought I have, which is choice. I know that for me, when I was, my kids were younger, I let them read what they wanted to read. Now, they will tell you, I can be the preacher, I can be the evangelist, I can tell them, read this, read this, read that. We know how much preaching works with kids. In my house, it doesn't work. So I have given them the power of choice and let them choose the books they want and read aloud. We do a lot of reading aloud in our family, and that's what kind of opens up great conversations about many, many things. Happy Black History Month, everybody. And these ideas are perfect for Black History Month. They're perfect for always, but they're really perfect now. This idea of choice, access, and read aloud are particularly relevant. So with respect to access, when my kids or any kids have access to a lot of books about a lot of experiences, life is a beautiful thing. So we all hear about windows and mirrors and doors and all of that as it relates to diversity and Black History Month and all of that. And I'm thinking about it within the context of, this pandemic. All right, so we're all home. I think about if someone during the pandemic said, you got to remove all the mirrors from your house, okay? And, the windows are going to be boarded up. And I feel like I can't go out a lot. I go out a little bit, but, and we're not going to let you out of your house. So there's that feeling of confinement. So when there's no mirrors anywhere, I'm a 10-year-old kid. I don't see myself. There's nothing reflected. I don't know what I look like. And I start to feel like I don't exist because I don't see me. The same thing with windows. I can't look out. If the door doesn't open, I cannot breathe. And that's what books about many experiences do. They give us the window, they open that window, they open that door, they let in the air, they let us breathe, which we really need to be doing, especially now. And the mirrors, it can't be said enough. I need to see myself reflected so that I know, again, if I'm a kid, I need to know that I am somebody and that my life matters and everything about me is important, and that's really critical. So I think that my mom might be watching, so I'm going to give a shout out to my mom. Hi, Mom, the retired teacher, who I will take 3 phrases from Mommy. One phrase is seeing is believing. So it goes back to that mirrors idea, like when I see myself, I believe in myself. And my mom always says, kids see what they see and they don't see what they don't see. So we think about that with respect to books. If I don't see myself reflected, I don't see myself. And when I do see myself, I see it. But when I don't, I feel somewhat neglected. And thank you, Mom, for those pearls of wisdom. And I know that we have some booksellers on and a lot of parents, of course, but I want to say when I'm thinking about all of these things, it's not just purchasing the books or having the books on your dining room table. It really is about, I think of books are like light bulbs. Okay, so if I have a light bulb and I don't plug it in and it's not ignited and I don't turn it on, it's just like a glass bulb. So that's what books are. Books are like light bulbs. We have to turn them on. And that's where the read aloud comes in. Fostering those conversations, reading aloud with your child, opening a book, and looking at the pictures counts as reading. My artist husband will tell you that. He was a struggling reader. He's very public about that, but looking at the pictures can count as reading. So true story, and I'm going to kind of end with this, which is that my son Dobbin, who is in college, by the way, we have a lot, as I said, there's a lot of remote learning going on. We call this house Pinkney University because there's a lot of laptops going on. But anyway, my son Dobbin came and sat with me 2 days ago here at this big, messy, books piled high dining room table. And he said, I have this creative assignment for school, and I want to do something creative around Black History Month. He said, I think I want to do something that is kind of like this tribute to Black women. Of course, this was music to my ears. So, and I could feel the preacher evangelist in me starting up, you know, like I'm looking at all these books, and I just kind of hung back, you know, thinking, you know, I resisted every temptation, like there's a book, you know. I just kind of hung back, and I let him kind of look at this smorgasbord of books on the dining room table, and I let him choose. You know, I didn't say anything. And he reached out a hand and he picked up several books, and he was inspired and ignited. And don't let anybody tell you that older kids do not like to read aloud. Not true. No matter how old, the read aloud, it never gets old. And that's how we have just survived this pandemic, a lot of togetherness. And again, it makes me feel really good about what's going on my dining room table. So I'll pause there, and yeah.
Well, I love the visual of your dining room table and you and your son being there. And I wrote down something you said, which is books are like light bulbs. That should be on a poster. I'm going to put it on a Post-it note so that I can see it when I'm in my office working. So my question for you, Andrea, is can you tell us about one or two of the books that your son selected?
Oh, yes, of course. Let me say when that happened, John, you know, again, like I could see the light bulb actually going on in his eyes. I could see the doors, I could see the windows, I could see the mirrors. And I'm going to show you one. So this is a book called King and the Dragonflies. It's a book that I published at Scholastic, and it's by Case and Callender, National Book Award winning book. And my son Dobbin is a member of the LGBT community, very proud of that. And here it is, you know, here's the window, the door, the mirror. And so this was a book that he grabbed. And, you know, I have a personal publishing philosophy, which is, I call it show the face, you know, so on a lot of the jackets, I like to show the faces. So this is the face of the main character, and that's one of the books that he grabbed. And then with respect to his mom, I want to do something for Black History Month, a tribute to Black women. I was so happy that we had the Ruby Bridges publishing program on the big smorgasbord dining room table. And this is Ruby's Through My Eyes. And there were a couple of others, so he had a lot to choose from. These are the Ruby Bridges books that we published very proudly at Scholastic. And I'll just close out by saying that, you know, I said, hey, you know, once he grabbed Ruby, you know, here it was in her own voice, you know, she's coming on like a rocket, saying, when I was 6 years old, the civil rights movement came knocking at my door. And I thought, that's it. So we had a beautiful moment together. Thank you for asking, John.
Oh, thank you, Andrea. And now Malcolm Mitchell is going to join us, and Andrea is going to introduce Malcolm.
Yes,
Say hi to him first. Hi, Malcolm. How are you?
Hi, Malcolm.
Hi, everyone. How are you?
I'll see you all in a little bit.
Okay, so it is my pleasure and delight to welcome my friend and fellow author. Talk about the power of the read aloud, access, choice, kids, all that. Malcolm Mitchell is the author, Super Bowl champion, literacy crusader, founder of Read with Malcolm, Read with Malcolm, and a beautiful, wonderful literacy initiatives. And I'm gonna turn it over to Malcolm now, talk about many things, but this is literally my very favorite book in the whole wide world by Malcolm Mitchell.
Andrea, I appreciate you. And this is an extraordinary opportunity for me. I always say that I'm very, very thankful anytime I'm giving the opportunity to speak, and especially with such great people, authors, advocates, and supporters for literacy. For me, I feel like I am only building a more robust argument, or building a more robust story for what everyone has already shared. My personal journey into literacy started off a little different. I started my journey as a reluctant reader. I think it's fair for me to assume the role of individuals living in poverty pockets, book deserts, and under-resourced communities. I think it's appropriate because I was that child. I understand how it feels to only believe athletics is a bridge to a better life. I understand how focusing in the classroom may be difficult when the night before the police went through your house looking for an uncle. I understand how getting a passing grade may take the back seat to where the next meal is coming from. These are the realities for many kids. These are the realities for many kids that we want to get headed down a more literate path. And I was no different than any other child who grew up in Valdosta, Georgia. I took the most natural course. I focused on football and neglected school. And as I always say, being an athlete has value, but only being an athlete leads you to destruction and chaos. And that's what I believe today. And I stand by that. But fortunately, I was granted an opportunity to fix the error that I made as a child. But there are millions and millions and millions of kids around the world who won't be afforded that time. And it's without a shadow of a doubt, once I got to the University of Georgia, I realized the most empowering tool that I could introduce to my life, the thing that would help me evolve as an individual, make me a better person, position me to take advantage of more opportunities that the world has to offer, the thing that would help me dream tangible dreams, the thing that would help me gain financial freedom and social mobility, that was reading. I came to this conclusion through a series of events, but regardless of that, I found out in order for me to be the best person I could possibly be, to unlock my full potential, I needed a literate brain. And once I came to that conclusion at 20 years old, I kind of reflected back on my community and realized there were tons of kids just like me who did not understand the power of reading. So I started asking myself a few questions. I asked myself the question, well, why didn't I understand this powerful tool much earlier? What took me so long to understand that reading could provide the same freedoms that I thought athletics would provide, which are two different things. That'll take a separate conversation to answer. But that was the reality of my situation as a child. I did not understand how reading could help me. I was not told in a way that was relevant to my day-to-day circumstances. There was not the same amount of attention given to me for passing a class as I got from scoring a touchdown. So I gravitated towards the touchdown. To make this constructive, I'll tell you the three things that I think that would have made a big difference in me absorbing the importance of reading a lot earlier in that type of community. I think if I would have been delivered the message of reading, how important of a role it played in life in a culturally and environmental relevant way, I would have understood that. Let me break it down a bit more. In my community, you were worried about gang violence, which is still relevant today. You were worried about where the next meal's coming from, which is still relevant today. And you have your mother working 3 jobs, you have a brother getting in trouble, and you have a younger sister that you have to be responsible for. Now, where in all of that can the ideal of reading play a tremendous part, enough to penetrate that child's mind to let them know it's of extreme importance? Well, here's the truth about reading that Pam, Ernest, and Andrea, and everyone else talks about so brilliantly, is that reading empowers an individual to think for themselves. It empowers them to have employment opportunities, and it empowers them to make decisions that will position them at a better place in their future. For me, the same financial freedom and social mobility that was gained through my athletic performance can be gained through reading. I think as a child, if I would have been explained that reading will grant you these same opportunities, that I might have given it more attention than I did in that environment. Another thing that Ernest and Pam mentioned at the beginning of their session was celebrating reading accomplishments. As a child, I can't remember any time I finished a book and I got the same reaction that I got after catching a pass in a football game. And not that they should be similar, but just some acknowledgement that you did something that was really cool, really beneficial. As a new parent, I know Jasmine and I, anytime we read a book with Oakley, he's a newborn, so he likes to rub his hands all over the book and pretend like he knows how to flip pages. It's really fun to see. But anytime we finish a book, we clap, we cheer, we get them excited. And I'm sure many new parents do that. But, it's really my goal to make sure as he goes throughout these earlier stages of life that I don't only do that for him as a newborn, but when he's 5 years old, when he's 7, when he's 12, celebrating those reading accomplishments, even if it's finishing a sentence, a chapter, an entire book, so forth and beyond. And the point that Andrea made that represents my life today is read anything. Graphic novels, picture books, chapter books, newspapers that they're still around. Just read anything that you enjoy reading. The other day, I picked up a book about photography. Now, does that have a storyline? Not really. It's just telling me about lenses and shutter speeds, but it's still reading. I'm gathering information and I can apply it. I loved reading King and the Dragonflies. It was an extraordinary book. I'm a 27-year-old person who still will go in the bookstore and buy a plethora of picture books. Why? Because it's reading and I enjoy reading it. There are no boundaries when it comes to reading books, and that's the beautiful thing about it. It's also the beautiful thing about writing them. There are no boundaries. Just read, and watch your brain reap the benefits of all that reading. To me, reading is the key to freedom. It's the key to not being weighed down by social decay and social bias. It's the ability to think for yourself, to think freely, and make very sound and concrete decisions. Read. And anytime I speak with children, I always say, in order to succeed, you have to read, because everybody wants to succeed. I've never met a person that said, hey, I'm going through life trying to fail. And it's my belief with reading, you give yourself the best opportunity to accomplish whatever goal you've set. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Malcolm. Don't go away though. I had 3 questions for you, and you answered all of them. And so, is what I'm going to first tell you is I've been watching the chat, and there are so many librarians and classroom teachers that are posting about how much fun they've had sharing my very favorite book in the whole wide world with their students.
About that a little bit
so that's what I'm going to ask you. Will you give like a very quick book talk about my very favorite book in the whole wide world?
Yes, my very favorite book in the whole wide world is a story that Michael Robertson, the illustrator, captured so well. And it's a story about a child who dealt with similar challenges as I did. In his journey, some sentences are too long, some words are too big, and some books too thick. But he perseveres and goes on this exploration to find his very favorite book in the whole wide world. And he gets some great advice from his mother. And it simply put, without telling too much, is sometimes the best stories can be found in ourselves. So Henley decides to share something that represents himself. And Scholastic did a tremendous job in publishing the book. Andrea did a great job in helping me bring Henley to life. So I hope you enjoy the story. It's one that's really had a real impact on me as I wrote it, coming to the realization that, I'm not the only one who needs to go on a journey for their very favorite book in the whole wide world.
And it is such a fun book to book talk. I've book talked it many times, and I love saying, I'm going to tell you about my very favorite book in the whole wide world. So thank you so much, Malcolm. I really appreciate your words of wisdom. And now I'm going to welcome Lauren Tarshis to the virtual stage. And Lauren, I'm going to pick up 2 of her books. Lauren is the author of the I Survive series. And in addition to being the author of the I Survive series, she's the editor-in-chief and publisher of classroom magazines at Scholastic and the editor of Storyworks. And I'm so excited now to turn over the virtual stage to the one and only Lauren Tarshis.
Thank you, John. You know, I'm all aglow from listening to Malcolm and Pam and Ernest and Andrea. You know, so many of everything that you said resonated so much for me. And I always feel, frankly, like I'm a fraud. The fact that I can't believe that I'm actually invited to participate on this panel because, you know, I never think about the person that I am now, you know, having written books and I work on these magazines. I really do. Sitting here, especially when Malcolm was speaking, I was flashing back to who I was when I was, you know, when I was young. And the first thing that I tell kids when I'm meeting them in their Zoom classrooms or when I get to visit schools is that I didn't read a book until I was 14. I showed them my 6th grade picture of all the 6th graders at Burr Farms Elementary School, which is here in Connecticut, where I live now still. I live in the town where I grew up. And I showed them all these kids wearing their sort of late 70s outfits. And I say, you know, if you had looked around, if those kids had looked around and you would ask them who is the last person they would expect to grow up to be an author one day, and I'm really sure that many of them would have chosen me. And, you know, I went through 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade. And I vividly remember all those years. And it wasn't until 10th grade that I actually successfully read a book from beginning to end. And it was A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. And the reason I was able to read it is because I was always able to read words very well. But if you put those words onto pages and added plots and characters, something would happen in my brain where all of that information would get just kind of blended up into a big chaotic mess. And I did not have courage the way Pam and Ernest were talking. I did not have courage as a learner. I was ashamed. And so I hid that problem from my parents and my teachers and my friends. And I still remember that feeling of pretending and being shut out of the great discussions that my friends were having. And, you know, I finally figured out that if I read every paragraph 2 or 3 times and took notes, it would give my brain enough time to catch up and stay organized. And the other thing I tell kids is I really still kind of have to do that. I love to read, but it's hard for me. And I think that's something also for parents too. It's a message that I have 4 children. None of them had the same level of problem that I had, but none of them found, you know, some kids find reading they just luxuriate in it. You know, they're under the covers with Lord of the Rings when they're, you know, 9 years old. But sometimes reading is hard, and sometimes it does take kids time to find out how they need to read, what is the strategy that it's going to work for them? Is it going to be today, there are so many amazing strategies. There are audiobooks. There are, of course, the read aloud that you can do as families. There are, you know, in our magazines, we have, you know, versions of articles that are on different levels. So, you know, we can watch videos that give us background knowledge that helps kids, you know, access stories that might be complicated. So the reason I always share this story with kids is, first of all, I really want them to understand that, you know, I did not come into the world knowing that I was going to become an author. I was 42 when my first book for kids came out. And it was just as I struggled to read, I also really struggled to become a writer. It took me 10 years to write my first author my first book for kids. And that's also something that I share with kids. I want them to understand that, you know, it doesn't have to be easy, that this is a journey, and that there are, of course, had I had the courage to talk to my friends or family or teachers about it, my journey as a reader would have been a little less fraught. You know, and I think for me, you know, now I write the series I Survived, which is, you know, I've written 20 of these books now. And it really, there are a lot of different inspirations that I can point to as to how I came up with the idea of writing these, high interest historical fiction stories about iconic disasters from the Titanic or the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, or most recently the wildfires. And I can trace it back in many ways to I have a picture of him. This is my son, Dylan, who's now 22, but this captures him. All he wanted to do was read about basketball. And I remember one day I could never find a book that he wanted to read. It was just a constant struggle. And I know so many of you parents face that same problem. And I remember going to the bookstore one day and running into his amazing teacher, Rashawn Cooper. And I said, "Hey, Rashawn, what are you doing here?" She goes, "I'm trying to find a book for your son to read." And I thought, oh my goodness, this is just a complete disaster. This teacher feels the obligation, this amazing educator is trying to inspire my kid to read. So I remember asking him, what kind of book do you want to read? What are the kinds of books that are going to really, what is it? And he said, he was pretty eloquent about it, actually. He was 10 years old, I remember. He said, "I want to read a book about a really cool topic, like a tornado. And I want there to be suspense. And I want the main character to be a boy like me." And this speaks, of course, to what Andrea said about, we want to read about characters that we can connect to. We want to feel ourselves pulled into a story. And, I think I'm very certain that, I thought writing these books was going to be very easy for me because I had written about a lot of similar topics in the magazine. They are so, they are so very, very challenging. The amount of research I do for reading, for each of the I Survive books, I'll maybe read 20 books on my own. And as I said, I still do struggle. So I have notebooks everywhere because I'm constantly taking notes and putting sticky, Post-its in all the pages. And sometimes I reread and sometimes I'll reread it on audio just to really get that information locked in. I travel to the places I write about. And, then I have to create a character whose experiences, it's a fictional character, but those fictional experiences do have to be, they're inspired by the real children whose stories I discover either directly by meeting kids, if it's a recent event, or in the research that I do. And then I have to spin that all together into a story that is going to, that's going to keep kids motivated and hook them in. And a lot of times I'm taking on very complicated topics. How do you explain why America wanted to break away from England during the Revolutionary War? How do you explain the Holocaust? How do I explain it for a tornado, how a tornado forms in a supercell thunderstorm in a way that is going to be comprehensible to kids? Because I assume that my kids know absolutely nothing about the topics that I'm about to introduce them to. I assume that they don't have the basic vocabulary to understand something like the Civil War or, any of the events that I'm writing about. So I think, what I see, is that my big insight that I want to share with all of you parents that I've learned from my own experiences, right, as a struggling reader, with my own children who really also struggle to find books, and now as a writer, because all the anguish of writing I Survived, and it is fairly torturous at times, is so, I just forget all about it because I have such wonderful experiences being able to connect to kids and with so many parents and grandparents. And what I've learned is that kids are just waiting to be fascinated, and including and maybe even struggling readers. They want to read about big, important events. They want to talk about them. They want to share, they want to share their knowledge. And I think if you meet kids where they are and sort of take them by the hands and lead them through a topic, they will stay with you. And once their imagination is sparked, then they come away not only with facts and background, but they come away with this motivation, the curiosity, as Pam and Ernest were saying, the curiosity to want to move forward. So what I say to every kid that I meet, I say, here's the question I want you to ask yourself when you finish reading. The minute you close one of my books, the minute you're done, I want you to say, okay, what do I want to learn next? What is next? And that might be, another book. That might be a conversation, a question you ask your parent or your teacher. That might be something you want to look up. And I really do see books and reading, and I think about my own life as, each book is sort of, is part of this foundation of knowledge, of empathy, of experience that helps us become who we are today. So, you know, I started out by saying, and I guess I misspoke a little bit. I wouldn't say that I feel fraudulent. I use the word ashamed. Those are memories that I carry those with me from as my, you know, when I think back on my own experience when I was younger. But I do feel that the experiences that I had struggling through school have certainly very much helped me in the work that I do today. And I'm especially happy to be with all of you and to be able to share with these amazing people. So what do you got for me, John?
And I'm especially happy to be here with you today and for the stories that you write. And Lauren, I'm reading the chat on YouTube, and so many teachers and parents are posting, thank you for sharing your own personal struggles, that it's really resonating with them. I'm going to ask you my question though, Lauren, during the Q&A, if that's okay.
That's fine, yes.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Huge round of applause to you, Lauren. Our next speaker is Phil Falco, and he is the creative director of Graphix, which means he has worked on books like Dogman and Not Enough and the ever popular Babysitter's Club. And so I'm going to pass it over to Phil now. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, John, and thanks to everybody else on the panel. I'm the only non-author here, so I just wanted to kind of explain what I do. I'm the creative director, but I have a background in art, and now I work with artists to kind of create, you know, the covers for all of the books. And with graphic novels, there's a lot that goes into it. Like we make end papers, and, you know, each page gets set up, and sometimes you're working with letters or colorists. And I really love the job. It's fantastic. And it was I was a big fan of comics growing up, and I was a reluctant reader when I started out as a kid. And, you know, I would read for school, but I was never really into it, but I loved to draw. And eventually I remember I went to a comic store with some friends, and then I became a huge comic book reader, graphic novels now, as everybody calls them. But that kind of led me down the path. And then I got into science fiction, prose novels, and fantasy. And then I really enjoyed nonfiction, and I quickly became, you know, not only a graphic novel reader, but a reader. And, you know, I see that over and over again with kids getting, you know, pulled into reading by graphic novels. And I think a lot of it is the art that really draws them in. And I could speak to my personal experience with my nephew, who's now a teenager. He's a huge reader, but he didn't start off that way. He was having problems getting interested, and he was more drawn to the screens, as my sister would always say. Like he loved cartoons. But one time when he came to visit my wife and I in Brooklyn, I had a stack of books from work, and I gave them to him, and we were out to lunch at a place, and instead of eating his cheeseburger and fries, he was sitting there reading this book cover to cover. Now, this isn't the actual moment when he was doing it, because we didn't want to interrupt him, but this is like about a year later. It's Bird and Squirrel, and, you know, he read this book, I wouldn't even doubt it was probably like 35 times. And he just like continued to do it. And, you know, he eventually discovered the Bone series by Jeff Smith. So while me and his brother were playing basketball, he was laying on the pavement reading Bone. And this is another, he didn't think that was comfortable enough, so he brought out a chair and a pillow, and he rubbed with our dog. But that was how he kind of got into comics or into reading. And then he, you know, got into nonfiction, and he reads all the time. Now his big complaint is that he's in high school, he's in a lot of honors classes, and he doesn't have time for recreational reading because he has so many books to read for school. He likes those too, but, you know, he wants more time, which is a complaint I think we all have. And also, like, when I was a kid and reading graphic novels, it was kind of a limited selection. You know, there were superhero stories, there were kind of gritty crime stories, and you know, but now there's like so much. Like for, you know, younger kids, you know, Banana Fox is one of my favorites, and I feel like when my nephew was a kid, this would have been, you know, his go-to. he actually, one of his favorite series was Wings of Fire, which is now a graphic novel too. And he's always yelling at me to get him these early. He's still a big fan. But, there's, also like true to life stories like Allergic by Megan Wagner Lloyd and Michelle May. That's one of my new favorites. And the Babysitter's Club, as John showed earlier. And also for other younger kids, there's the Geronimo Stilton graphic novels. I was a big fan of these. And when we were working on this, I'm sure some of the parents out there are familiar with this series. And it has a lot of fun type throughout in the prose novels. And we were trying to kind of do that when we adapted it into the graphic novel format too. And it really, watching some of my other nephews, they're younger now and they're reading this, and it's a lot of fun. They like laugh at all the text and everything. So, but yeah, for me, it's like I've seen graphic novels be the gateway into reading and getting kids engaged. And I can't remember which one of the panelists was saying that, you just have to, there's like a book out there for every kid's interest, and there's a graphic novel now too. So like it's a passion of mine to kind of, work with the rest of the graphics team and bringing these books to the world. And yeah, I think I close with that.
That is a perfect statement to close with, because again, I'm reading all of the chat on YouTube and people are going on and on about how much their students love Dogman. I am a huge Dogman
I'm
fan.
a Dogman fan too.
Love Dogman. And of course, I love Captain Underpants. He's always looking at my back. So Phil, I'm going to ask you the first question. I think everyone's going to be joining us. So there were a lot of questions that came in when people were registering, and this question probably came up 20 or 30 times. Actually, Phil, the first question for you was, what exactly does a creative director do? And you did answer that right away in the beginning. Yeah. But a lot of people posted about, what would you say to someone, a parent that said to a child, you cannot read graphic novels. Graphic novels are beneath you. Graphic novels are not real books. What would be your response to that? Which I've heard many times people say graphic novels are not real books.
I feel like they are real books and they are real stories. And yeah, obviously. And it's, it's just a different way to tell a story and for somebody to absorb that story. It's always about the stories. And it's for some people, like for me, I can say personally, like I love to draw and I love to look at artwork, and that's what really captured my interest at the time. And I think that was the same case for my nephew too, and so many other kids. It's such an important thing. So
thank you, Phil, and thank you for having the visuals that you held up throughout. Yeah, now, Lauren, I'm going to ask the next question to you, which is from the chat. It says, knowing that you struggle so much with reading and writing, what is it that makes the struggle worth it for you? Oh, I can't hear you.
I think it's connection. I think, it's a lot of my author friends and I are talking about now how during these, the pandemic, one of the joys is that we are able to connect with even more kids potentially than ever before, because we're Zooming with so many kids per day. And that the opportunity to, as a reader, connect with these other worlds, connect with these other ideas. And as an author, I cannot tell you the joy of being able to talk to a group of kids about work that I've created. It's really indescribable to me.
Thank you, Lauren. The next question is from Aaron, and Aaron's question is, how long should you continue to read aloud with your child once they're able to read aloud on their own? And I'm gonna give my opinion, and then Pam, I'm gonna pass it over to you. I think you should read to your children through high school, through college, beyond. One of my favorite anecdotes comes from Kevin Hankis, where he read to his children every morning at the breakfast table through high school. And then sometimes when his children got to college, he would read to them over the telephone. But I would love to hear what Pam Allyn has to say.
Well, of course, John, I completely could not agree with you more. And I would say that for a couple of really important reasons. One is it is so deeply bonding. It's such an amazing bonding experience. There's something about the text, the book, the poem, the story, and the human voice or sign language or whatever the mode is that you're using to convey this amazing experience together is something that happens. It's like unlike anything else, which is why we love World Read Aloud Day. But the second thing too is that reading aloud is really good for the developing brain. So from an educator point of view, no matter what age your child is, we want them to keep marinating literary language, informational language, poetic language, and that's something that happens very easily and smoothly with the read aloud. And I'll say just a little comment about that is that my father, he loved to read aloud to me to all of us from the sports pages. He was a big Cleveland fan. So any kind of Cleveland sports article, he was always going to read aloud to us. And his voice is always in my mind. And just to the memories of that, I mean, I was in high school and then of course, later on in life, and always the sound of his voice attached to those thrilling stories. I mean, I wouldn't say they won as much as he would have liked them to, but it was still just a kind of a deeply, deeply memorable experience for me. So everybody should do it as long as you can. Children shouldn't think that once they read independently that they don't get to read communally.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. The next question is going to be for Andrea, and it comes from Patricia. What are some of your top read alouds for 1st through 3rd graders right now? What are some books for 1st through 3rd graders that you're loving?
Okay, well, Pamela, was that the name of the question asker? Patricia.
Yes, Patricia.
Patricia, thank you for asking. Well, you know, I'm gonna say,
yay.
This is a great read aloud, my very favorite book in the whole wide world. And I see some books also that you have there, John. So All Because You Matter by Tammy Charles, illustrated by Brian Collier, a great read aloud. And there are some, you know, classics that just never get old. Just reading to my nephew, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. I like the repetition and that. Oh, I didn't even see it there. Okay, a little butterfly good.
Fell over.
There we go. So, but I think that, you know, the main thing is to do it, to read aloud. So as much as we can.
Next question comes from Jamie, and it's, what is the best way to build reading stamina? So maybe Ernest or anyone that wants to volunteer.
Sure. I mean, it's definitely something that Pam and I talk about a lot in the Every Child a Super Reader. You know, anecdotally, I tell my college students when they get bored in class, how come no one ever gets bored at a rock concert or a football game, right? So the stamina is related to your motivation and your joy around it. You know, they could be playing football for 5 hours, or your favorite hip hop group could be going on and on. So one of the things we want to do, I think to the point that Pam and Andrea made in the read aloud, what's really important is the connection. So you can develop a lot of read aloud stamina just by having conversation with kids while you're reading, getting their opinion, and they just love being with parents. So that's a motivating factor. But second, if we really talk to kids about what they're interested in, I've seen a lot of questions about, should it be nonfiction, should it be graphic novels? The answer is, if they're really into it and they ask for it, yes, because if they choose it, then they're gonna have more stamina. Even still, you go slow. I mean, even if it's 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, we have patience with kids and we kind of bring them along slowly. Giving a kid like 45 minutes, an hour, when they're reluctant readers, it's too much. So you want to leave them wanting more. Maybe we stop the read aloud after 5 minutes, like, oh, you want to go to bed? Like, no, one more minute, right? So we kind of bring them along, but really, if there's real connections with the book, if there's real connections with the reader, a reading community, kids are naturally going to develop that stamina. The stamina is the key to the fluency. The more repetition they have, the better they're going to be. But we absolutely have to give them choice, and we have to welcome them into reading communities.
Thank you, Ernest. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. The next question is, how can I keep my toddler interested in books, or what are some of your favorite books for toddlers?
Well,
I was going to say Malcolm, because you have an infant, so I didn't want to put you on the spot though.
That's okay. I felt the pressure just building. I do have a 7-month-old. His name is Oakley Grant Mitchell, and me and his mom go through this little, I would say, book war with how he treats books and how he interacts with them. Toddler, Oakley's 7 months, so I can only speak from that perspective. And for me, it's about reading this story, getting it really involved into the book, using my voice to get him excited, to kind of, build some emotional response for him. And then I let him touch, feel, try to eat the book, and and it's kind of just for me, it's him becoming comfortable with the book, and also allowing him to understand this is something that's fun, that we do together as a family. Therefore, he looks forward to it. Now, once he gets 2 or 3 years old, I might have to adapt my tactics. But for now, it's just about making sure it's fun, it's exciting, it's a moment that we spend together. It's him getting comfortable with the books, him seeing me and his mother engage in the process of reading aloud. So it becomes more of a natural transition versus a hard right turn like I had to make when I was much older.
That's a perfect response. Thank you. So this is going to be the last question, which is just I see in the chat. It's how do you engage a kindergartner who feels like learning to read is a big chore? Who would like to take that one?
I'm happy to I'll say something about it, just because I think that kindergarten is, of course, such an incredible moment for a child. They're kind of coming into their own, seeing their older siblings or people around them as readers. So they're sort of testing the water to see how much who am I as a reader? And Ernest and I talk about this, as this idea of super readers. And I think to really engage a kindergartner means treat them like a reader, even if they're just starting to read. So create a space for them in the home where they have their own book nook or reading corner. Talk about them as they are a reader. Invite them to make choices, so that choice is really empowering. So to invite them to talk about their passions and their interests, if they love animals or bugs, or they just like being around outside, or they just have some, they love to build Legos, things like that, then match those interests up to the books that you can browse through together, and make it feel warm and cozy and good, because that really is, kindergartners love that feeling. And I think right at that moment, they're about, they're learning to read. So I think they're very conscious of what they don't know. So to keep them in the world of what they do know.
Oh, I love that. And one of the things I miss the most about being an active school librarian is kindergartners, because on the first time they visit the library, they're all crying because they want to go home. And then I always fall in love with all of them. Thank you so much, Malcolm, for celebrating books tonight. Lauren, Andrea, Phil, Ernest, and Pam. I love rounds of applause, and I'm giving you all huge, humongous, heartfelt rounds of applause. And now I am going to do the closing. So thank you again to all of you. Thank you to everyone out there who joined us tonight. A huge thank you to Shara and Alex, who made all of this possible, and all of the partnering bookshops. You can see a full list of all of the bookshops, I believe, beneath me. And if you go to scholastic.com/Scholastic Parents Night, you can also find the full list there, as well as book lists and digital swag. Scholastic has tons of curated book lists and recommendations that you can find on the Scholastic Parents site. And make sure, if you're on Instagram, that you follow @Scholastic Bookshelf. There are so many amazing recommendations there. Please visit your local participating bookshop to pick up some awesome swag on a first-come, first-served basis. And lastly, Valentine's Day is, I believe, 4 days from today, but it's also Clifford's birthday, February 14th. So a big happy birthday to Clifford, the big red dog. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. And as always, happy reading. And I hope you have a wonderful evening. Bye, everyone.